All right, welcome back to Ducks and Pucks. This is your host, Mike Walters, along with my co-host, Eddy Jones. This week we've got some news for you on the Ducks. Saku Koivu retired, and Bruce Boudreau got a contract extension. We're also going to talk about the possible NHL expansion and some of the rule changes that the league announced this week. So first up for the Ducks, we have Saku Koivu announced his retirement, Eddy.
Yeah, it was kind of hinted that it was going to happen. I think most people assumed it would with Solani retiring, and he really didn't have any spot on the team if he was going to come back with the Ducks. And maybe the only two possible places he could have gone otherwise were Montreal and Minnesota. But I think in the end he made the right decision. His best years are past him, and he's had 18 solid seasons in the NHL. So yeah, I mean, he might not be done playing hockey. There's still a chance that him and Solani go over and play for Jokerit. That's still kind of up in the air. But yeah, I think it was a good decision for him, and it'll be sad to see him go. But he had a great career with Montreal and with the Ducks.
Yeah, I mean, Koivu played, over 1,100 games. He had 255 goals and 577 assists for a total of 832 points. So he had a really, really good career. And I don't know if everybody knows, but he also came back too from that lymphoma he had when he was on Montreal back in 2001, in which he came back and played a couple of those games at the end of the season. And then, he came back and played every season after that. So, I mean, it's a really, really good story to see Koivu play so many seasons in the NHL despite those health issues that he had in the past.
Yeah,
And
yeah, I remember watching that game when he came back. Most of my family were Montreal fans, so I remember seeing him come back after he had cancer. And his inspirational kind of story is kind of like the Mario Lemieux story. He comes back and it kind of gets lost to people that he had such a good career. He didn't have great years in Anaheim, but he had a really solid career despite all the problems he had to go through in his life.
yeah, and like you mentioned, Eddie, he may not be done too. It's still up in the air. We put out the poll question again about what would Koivu do next. I've had it on the website a couple times, but in the latest one we did, looks like most people are hoping, that he'll, like Tamu, they're hoping that he'll take up some kind of a management position with the Ducks. That's kind of what we've got as our leader right now on the poll. But I don't know. It's up in the air. I mean, he and Solani could both go to Jokerit and play in some kind of a deal that we had heard from before, where Solani might do, the home games or all the games, or maybe they both take management roles with the Ducks, Eddie.
Yeah, they could take management kind of coaching roles. I also wouldn't be surprised either if Solani went back. I mean, if Koivu went back to Montreal too, because that's where he spent most of his career, and did some kind of management or coaching role there. But yeah, it'd be nice to see Solani and Koivu stay in some kind of role in the organization, or even see them play one more season in Jokerit. But yeah, it'll be cool to see how this all pans out before the season or after the season starts.
Yeah, we'll keep our eye definitely still on Solani and Koivu, and as always, keep everybody updated. The other bit of news that we had this week, Eddie, actually on the same day, they talked about Bruce Boudreau and his contract extension. A couple more years, Eddie.
Yep, yeah, and it's not a big surprise here. They're keeping him in Anaheim through the 2016-2017 season. I don't see anything wrong with this. I think this is definitely a good deal for the Ducks to get him yeah, re-inked for 2 more years or added onto his contract. He's the most winning or the most winningest coach right now, and that's out of active coaches. He's back-to-back Pacific titles don't really hurt either. So I think it's a great deal, and it's going to be nice to have him back, and hopefully we can push on past the second round in the playoffs this year.
Yeah, and that's another poll question we threw out there, Eddie, too, about getting past the second round. And overwhelmingly, most of the fans believe that the Ducks can get past the second round with Boudreaux. I've still heard a few, chirping from a few people on social media that they're, not too happy. They think that, not getting past the second round to them doesn't mean anything because the regular season, you do so well, you end up first or second, like he did with Washington. He's done with the Ducks, but it means nothing once you get stopped in the second round. But I don't really agree with some of the people that are throwing that out there because I mean, who would the Ducks get, Eddie? I mean, it just I understand. I mean, we all want to get past the second round. We get that, but I mean, who else would we go get, Eddie?
Yeah,
There's nobody.
it's like what, so you can put Solani in the GM role. There's no
Right.
one realistically, or sorry, in the coaching role. There's no one realistically good enough or as good as Bruce Boudreau out there. He's arguably one of the better coaches in the league right now. His winning percentage for his career and with the Ducks, show just that. So he struggled in playoffs, but it's not easy to go into the past the second round every time you get in the playoffs. I know he hasn't done it before, but he's only been in the NHL for coaching for 9 years. So it's not like some coaches go through their whole career and consider good coaches and they don't win the Stanley Cup. I think he has what it takes, and a lot of the pressure can't just go on him as well. It's got to go on the players too. We took the Stanley Cup champions to Game 7 last year, so you can't really fault Boudreau for that. He did he coached us to a great season. Even and you can even consider it a great playoffs too, considering how far we took it. So I think Bob Murray and the fans just got to get behind him, and obviously the Ducks organization's got behind him, giving him a 2-year extension. I think he's got what it takes, and he's got a new team, his team behind him now, and we'll see how far he can go this year.
Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned, his record at the Ducks for the shortened season, and then when he came in for Carlisle, and last season, 111 wins, 55 losses, and then 22 ties or shootouts, if you will. That's not bad. I mean, you're talking about a 600 something percentage winning percentage. I mean, it's nothing to sneeze at. And like you said, losing to the Kings in Game 7, it's not like we got swept 4 games. And we very easily could have won that. So I think you make some good points there that we should be glad to have him, and I think that the Ducks will still end up in one of those top seeded teams in the West. And another thing that people don't realize too is the West is loaded. You got to go through Chicago and the Kings, and then you've got other decent teams that we've talked about in the last 2 podcasts that have gotten other players like St. Louis and Colorado, and even Dallas is coming up too. So the West is super competitive, and I think Boudreau is still our man, Eddie.
Yeah, and maybe his main problem this year is going to be dealing with the goaltenders, two relatively inexperienced goalies between the pipes for the Ducks this year, and that'll be his main project, I think, that he's going to have to deal with, and just keeping guys on track, lead them to the same kind of season they did last year, and you got to remember too, like he's the fastest coach to reach 300 wins in NHL history. The Ducks basically have one hand on the cup, and his job is to help them get the other hand on the cup by the end of the season. So I don't have any worries. I think he's the guy to lead the way. And I think we have a good chance of doing that this year with the team that him and Bob Murray have put on the field.
I agree, Eddie. So it'll be interesting to see how we do. The only other news that we're still waiting for is, Devontae Smith-Pelly. We haven't heard, so we're still waiting on that. Though we've heard, just through social media that they should be coming up with a deal here soon. And of course, once we figure that out, we will get that to everybody out there. Looking around the NHL and some other news, it looks like the NHL, there have been talks that they want to expand. So, what are some of the cities, Eddie, that have been talked about, and what are your thoughts on, whether or not it's likely or if it's too far-fetched of an idea for the NHL to go to?
Yeah, we're just a little bit late on it, but we did the season preview and stuff. But we've got Toronto, Seattle, Quebec City, and Las Vegas are the 4 teams that are rumored to come in 2017 for NHL expansion. To start off with, the one I think that probably has the best chance of succeeding is probably Seattle. I think that's got to be top on their list. You look at some of the franchises they have there and professional sports with the Seahawks and how well they've done and the arena they have there for the Seahawks, and you look at smaller market, sports in the MLS for the Seattle Sounders, and they fill that place sometimes for soccer games, and I could see hockey doing really well down there. I wouldn't really I'd be surprised if it did bad. They've got the Mariners, they've got the Seahawks, and they've got the Sounders. So I think adding a hockey team to that mix, and possibly they're eventually looking at bringing the Supersonics back there. So it's just a sports city, and it'd be a nice addition to add a hockey team there. And they've got that rivalry with Vancouver already set up as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Seattle is number one. Like you mentioned, getting the Seattle Supersonics back for the NBA. The job that Carroll's done with the Seahawks and the NFL, obviously winning last year and basically dismantling Denver. The city is definitely alive with sports, and I think they would be number one to get a team. And obviously, Eddie, if they're going to add one team, they got to add two teams. So what would be another city you would think that the NHL would go towards for adding a second team?
I think if you're gonna put it like if you're gonna rank it, Toronto and Quebec City are for me are the two next ones. I think Toronto is the most likely one. The Maple Leafs are the most the highest valued, probably the most popular, most successful money wise franchise in the league, and putting another team in Toronto it wouldn't be such a bad idea. Looking at they've got two teams in New York. So a couple teams in the LA area, obviously with Anaheim and LA. So putting another team in Toronto would not be such a bad idea. They could probably play at the ACC until a new arena is built, and that's what these things kind of fringe on is the ability and how fast they can build an arena to accommodate these new teams. I think eventually they'd want to play this new Toronto team out of maybe Mississauga, Markham, all right, the greater Toronto area, somewhere around there. But for the time being, at least they can play in the ACC. It kind of prevents some scheduling issues, but I think Toronto's the number two on the list for an expansion franchise.
Yeah, and we talked about this before, Eddie, and people that aren't familiar with the Toronto fan base, or I mean, or Canadians, as far as obviously their passion for hockey, explain to the fans that basically in Toronto, regardless how the team's doing, what is it like with the fan base there? It's pretty intense still, correct,
Yeah,
Eddie?
yeah, it's one of the if not the most intense franchise in the league. They know they're bad, but they still show up. Media wise, it's probably the most intense. In the NHL that you could get. Maybe Montreal's up there as well, but yeah, Toronto. The only thing I think could be an issue is because Toronto is so successful with the Maple Leafs, and there's such a huge fan base, and if anybody's a hockey fan in Toronto and you're born in Toronto, you're a Maple Leafs fan. So the problem kind of arises, where do these other fans come from? Where do
Hmm.
if they build a team in Markham, you could say there's maybe, most of the people living there are hockey fans or Leafs fans. Well, they might be the ones that would say, okay, we've got a hometown team now. They're in Markham, so this could be our team. But then where do you got to recruit the other fans from somewhere else? I think that could be the only problem. Is do you want to pry fans away from the Leafs, and then you've got to split the attendance in both for both teams. I think maybe that could be the only reason playing out of the same arena could be a good thing. People might support both teams, but I think that could be the only issue with it.
Yeah, because I mean, if you think about it too, I mean, some people don't realize, the Kings came around 1967, Ducks came around 1993, way after. I mean, obviously they don't play in the same arena, but they're very, very close. They're just a 40-minute drive on the freeway. If there's no traffic, everybody out here knows what I'm talking about. If there's traffic, it's well over an hour, but it's still relatively close. So there's still two fan bases out here. And hockey is now obviously in the last couple of years gotten much, much bigger out here with the outdoor game, the Ducks winning the cup, the Kings winning the cup twice. So I think, like you said, the only difference being is that obviously the fans being so passionate there, it would be kind of difficult to see how they would divide, the fan base in Toronto.
Yeah, and I think with the third team that we've got on there too is that this could become a problem with the same as in Toronto with Quebec City becoming a team. because then you've got to compete with the Montreal Canadiens. And
Hmm.
the same kind of thing, situation. Original six team. These are two of the most storied franchises in the NHL, and Montreal is number one when it comes to history. And how do you compete with that? I know they've had Quebec Nordiques have been there before, and obviously that didn't work out. So bringing a team back to Quebec City could be great, as for the team could be supported well. It's just where do you get the fans from? And I think with Quebec, it's a little bit easier because when Montreal and Quebec City aren't as close as if you're going to put one in Toronto in the Greater Toronto area. And people on the outer skirts where Quebec City is would be Quebec City fans, and then people near closer to Montreal would be Montreal fans. So I don't think it's as big as a problem with Quebec City. But I still think the first two, Toronto and Seattle, are better options. But Quebec City, if they're gonna do a four-team expansion, and as it's come out in reports, Quebec City is on that list.
Yeah, and for those that don't know, Quebec Nordiques was the team that then ended up moving to Colorado, became the Colorado Avalanche. Just for those of you that don't know, and would you liken their situation, Eddie, to kind of the Winnipeg Jets situation? That the Winnipeg Jets lose their team, then they get the team back. Would it be a similar situation for Quebec? If they get, obviously they may not be the Nordiques, they may be another name or whatever they decide. But do you think it would be something similar to that kind of situation, or do you think it would be different?
Yeah, I think it could be similar. Um, with Winnipeg, it's a little bit easier to bring him back, and then all those people there are are still Jets fans. So there's a lot of people who are Jets fans, and they left. Now they came back, and you've got to assume there's probably the same thing with Quebec Nordiques. If you bring them back, I think the best option for them would to just be rename them the Quebec Nordiques if you're gonna bring it back there. Change around the jerseys like the Winnipeg Jets did. But I think the best thing the Jets franchise did was keeping it called the Jets, so you don't alienate those fans who've been Jets fans even when they were gone. But yeah, I think it could be much of the same situation with a new team coming back after losing one. And I think it'd be a good idea, and it has potential to be a franchise that could last, and not they won't have to go through that again.
Now, if you look at it, if we're going through three cities so far, so if there was a fourth city and the NHL just decided to add four teams at once or over the period of a couple of years, what do you think would maybe be a fourth city that the NHL would look at?
Well, in reports, it's Las Vegas, and in my opinion, I wouldn't go and put it in Las Vegas. I just don't think it's such a good idea for one, having it such a so close to being able to, the sports betting industry, and then having a team in Vegas. I don't see it being a great idea. Who goes to Vegas to watch a hockey? I mean, I know obviously there's people who live in Las Vegas. I just don't know if it would be successful. Obviously, with the reports coming out with these four teams, there's gotta, if they're any bit true, the NHL's obviously looked into it and seen that there's possibility for success, which isn't saying a whole ton. There's teams were putting Atlanta, and obviously we know how that worked out. So
Right.
I just don't see it being a great option. In the long run for a franchise, it might be, with the if they build up enough hype in the first year or two, it would be great. But then if the team's not winning, and the chances are with an expansion team, you're not going to be winning for the first 3 or 4 seasons. I don't see Las Vegas being a suitable long-term franchise. It would really surprise me if it worked out to be. It would be kind of like a Phoenix situation, but obviously Phoenix has had their struggles as of late too. So
Yeah, I agree. I've been to Vegas, I don't even know how many times, but other than college football with UNLV, there's no professional team. I mean, you don't have baseball, basketball, football, and I mean, you've got college level stuff, but you have no professional other fans to kind of pull from at all. So I mean, they could try it like you said, but I think it would be very, very difficult just because, like you said, most people go to Las Vegas on their vacations to go do whatever, see the shows, gamble, all that other stuff that, Vegas is known for. So I don't see it being a sports city, period. I mean, for any professional team. So I highly doubt That would be the fourth city. Is there any other cities that you would think either in the U.S. or Canada that the NHL should look at maybe?
Well, before these reports came out, Hamilton used to be rumored in Ontario as a team that could possibly get a franchise, along with teams like places like Seattle. In Canada, I don't think putting there's places where you really can't put teams. I think Saskatchewan, putting a team in Saskatoon is really hard with the population they have there. Another team in Vancouver has been rumored before, which is sort of like the Toronto situation. Obviously, we've got that team in Quebec City. Putting a team out east isn't really an option in Canada as well. So I think Hamilton and London were rumored, and another team in Vancouver. As for the states, I really don't know. I think Seattle obviously is the best option. And moving on from there, I'm off the top of my head, I really can't think of anywhere else they'd put them. There's probably are suitable options to put another franchise, but I think the three that they had there, and then possibly rethinking another fourth franchise for that list somewhere in the U.S. would be a good option for the NHL.
Yeah, the only thing I could maybe see for, I don't know Canada. I mean, like you do, so I'm not even gonna go there. I mean, we've already talked about Toronto and, as you mentioned, Vancouver and the other couple areas. The only other thing maybe I could see is maybe in Texas. The state is so big and they've got multiple teams and multiple sports. That's maybe one that they could look at. I'm not. This is just me talking. I haven't seen a report or anything like that. I'm just saying that because Texas is such a large state and they've got multiple teams in the other professional sports. So that's maybe one that I don't know. Maybe I could see, Eddie. That's really all I got on my end.
Yeah, maybe like a Houston team or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, because you got the Cowboys and you've got the Texans. So I mean, you just never know. It could be something like that where they would have one in that area. Because I mean, obviously Texas is big on football, of course, and then they've got basketball with the Mavericks and the Spurs too. So, I mean, it wouldn't be a far-fetched idea for them to do that because that state can more than, ample to handle two teams in the NHL.
Yeah, and the Stars do surprisingly well for being in Texas. A lot of people didn't think they would end up succeeding there, and they've shown that they can have a stable team, and they've won a Stanley Cup. So I think having a team in Houston could be another option for them too. I think that's definitely a better option than putting it in Las Vegas. But in the end, it's really up to the NHL, and if that's one of their options, they'll end up putting a team there.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. And any of the reports did you see when they were talking about this may happen? Was it next season or within 2 years? I haven't seen a time frame. I just heard rumors.
The time frame that was rumored is around to the 2017, sometime around then. But anytime Gary Bettman's been asked about it or anybody else and high up in the NHL organization, they've kind of denied that any talks have been, taking place. If they are, they're preliminary talks, and this isn't really a major priority for the NHL, and it isn't. But I think they're kind of just blowing smoke over it. I think there's been talks about it, and obviously if these reports are going out, and it seemed like they weren't really out of nothing. There was a lot of people reporting on these, more so than I've seen in a while. So I think they've definitely had some talks, but if anything happens, it's not for at least 3 or 4 years.
Okay, but you know what makes sense to me too, though, is if say Seattle is number one, and then say maybe Vancouver gets another team, or say that Texas or something like that does come up, whatever. I can see the NHL adding two initially, and then obviously putting them in the West to balance out the teams, Eddie. Because otherwise, they add a team in the East, then they might have to go back to say like Detroit and say, okay, Detroit, you're going to go back to the West, which I don't think they want to do. So I think most likely there would be two teams added to the Western Conference. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the best option for the NHL is to add two expansion teams, and then move a team like the Panthers or another struggling team, and replace two teams with the two other teams they feel like putting in there, because then that puts you at 32, which is a nice number. I think at 32 teams is better than having 34. And it's been rumored that Florida has a chance to move just like before Phoenix or Arizona worked out their problems. Arizona was on that on the way to moving out of Phoenix. So I think that's the most logical option. Other than Florida, it's kind of tough to say who else would or what other franchise would be moving unless Arizona comes on some of the same problems they've had before. But I think that's the best way to go about it is to have two expansion and then two franchises that move into the other areas. And then if you do that, you can work it out so it's even and it ends up being 16 and 16 in each conference. And I think that's definitely the way they should end up considering going.
Yeah, because I mean, I've heard this from some of the teams, or I mean some of the fans from the Eastern Conference teams, and they're like, well, you've got 16 teams and only 8 make the playoffs. The West, you've got 14 and 8 make it. So if you're in the West, you have a much better chance of making it, and it's not necessarily even. And that's some of the stuff I've heard from East Coast fans.
Yeah, I don't think it actually plays such a. I think a lot of people would say that are when their team actually doesn't make the playoffs. I get it. There's a numbers difference in it, but if your team's everybody plays the same amount of games, so I don't see it being such a huge issue. But yeah, if you're gonna add teams, you're not gonna want to have two more teams in a conference and another one or three or four. So you want to even it out and have possibly if you can 16 and 16.
Right. Well, we'll keep our eye, see what's going to happen with the expansion. As of now, some of the changes that the NHL actually did make were to the rules, Eddie, and we'll kind of go through these one by one and see if you and I like them or not, and give our feedback. But one of the first rules they did is they changed the restricted area in the goalkeeper area, Eddie. And what do you know about the change, and what do you think?
Yeah, it looks like they're expanding the trapezoid behind the net by 2 feet from the goalpost on both sides of the net. It just gives the goalies more room to play the puck and you kind of saw that last year. There's a little bit of issues with the amount of space they had. I don't see it being making a huge difference. It kind of gives the goalies more room so they avoid behind the net collisions, play the puck around. It's a nice rule to put in there. It doesn't really change the game a ton. Just it's more one of the safety rules that they're putting in play.
Do you think, since the area is, a little bit bigger, do you think that helps the offense a little bit since, the goalie can't go as far back to play the puck?
I don't know. You rarely see it where the goalie comes out. And the player is in there to challenge him and he hits the goalie or something like that. I don't see this really helping the offense. This is more so just for the goalies. It's not like they're widening the nets or like how they shortened the nets last year. So I don't think it's gonna really affect the offense as much as it helps the goalies be able to keep safe behind the net and be able to play the puck easier.
Yeah, because I mean, like you mentioned, it's not like they made the net bigger or that they made the goalie pad smaller or anything like that. It just seems like they're just making it more. I mean, their goal is to try and have more offense, but this rule to me seems a little bit more of a safety issue. So there's not as many collisions when the goalie goes behind the net.
Yeah, and that's where you'll see with a lot of these other rules, they're either focused on generating more offense or keeping towards keeping the game more safe, and that's what you're gonna see that trend with the rest of the rules that they've announced so far.
One of the other rules that I like that they changed is the video goal judge basically having some broader discretion as far as allowing kicked in goals. This used to just drive me nuts watching not just the Ducks games, but I watch other teams play too, and you see so many times where a puck is shot towards the net, it goes off a player's skate in the net. The guy doesn't intentionally kick it or make that, like you're kicking a football or a soccer ball or whatever, and then it's just called back, Eddie. And I think that this rule at least will give them a little bit more leeway so that players aren't penalized so much for inadvertently knocking the puck in.
Yeah, in my opinion, I think in a perfect world that this rule would be completely removed. In the fact that you can't kick the puck into the net. I don't really see an issue with it. Like if you can get your, it's not like people are doing it all the time. Like it doesn't happen every game.
Right.
I can understand if you put your glove over the puck and you throw it into the net or something. A lot of times these guys are skating and they can't get their stick down on the ice and they just kind of direct it in. I don't see why that's such a big issue. If they're skating and it's inadvertent, it goes off a knee or something like that, and that's gonna count. Um, I don't see why it's such a big issue, but this rule, extending the video goal judge and how they're going to review the call, kind of gives the refs more leeway in the decision. I don't see it affecting it too much. When we see video review of these things happening, I don't think anybody's going to really notice any difference in how they're judging it. It's just going to be kind of a behind the scenes things that they're going to hope cleans up the video review of this issue.
Another aspect too is, and we know when the ref has the intent to blow the whistle, the play is stopped. And again, this is another one that drives me nuts sometimes. But you see the puck go in the net. Um, at first glance, obviously, it's difficult sometimes for the ref to see it when there's a massive bodies in front of the net. But you'll see a replay where the puck goes in the net. Ref intends to blow the whistle, and it's done. But it seems like also in this rule, they're going to give some more leeway for the situation room to review these plays too, and possibly overturn them if they deem that the puck did go in, um, depending on whenever the ref had that intent to blow the whistle. Eddie.
Yeah, and this is another one I don't think we're gonna notice a huge change in. It's another behind the scenes one. It's not like they're changing the rule really. They're kind of just modifying the way they review it. If the ref blows a whistle before the puck goes in, it's still not going to be a goal, even if the puck was never covered. So, the rule's not changing as much as they're just allowing for more accurate video review of the situation. I think it will help a bit. It will, some calls that would normally go against some teams when they shouldn't will, be rectified. But is another one you're not going to really notice a huge difference in unless kind of paying attention to these small details and recording them down. But yeah, it's going to be a small change, but hopefully it will help clarify these situations. I know that a lot of times it can be really frustrating for some fans.
What about they didn't decide to do anything with the goalie interference as far as players run into the goalie, which that was a big topic too. You remember the Stanley Cup Finals with Lundqvist and King that play had happened, and that was a hot topic. And that was just one. I mean, there were other plays too. I remember there was one with San Jose and the Kings that happened, and other playoff series as well. Do you think the league should just stay as is, like they're gonna do, or do you think they should have done something to review those plays a little bit more too as well?
I think I'm not sure how they've included this in, but there is the rule they've added in Rule 23 with the game misconduct penalties. They've added a new game misconduct category. So they've added clipping, charging, elbowing, interference, kneeing, headbutting, and butt ending. They're moving from a general penalty category into the same category as boarding and checking from behind. So five in a game kind of penalties. And I think
Mhm.
with this interference that they've added, this might carry over into goaltender interference if they deem it to be intentional, intention to hurt, or they could have got out of the way and they bowl over the goalie. This could be added into the category as a game misconduct. So I think if that's added in there, then they've done enough. I think um, adding that to the game misconduct category is a good idea.
That would make sense. I would suppose, Eddie, because then you're deterring that behavior from happening, and if you're deterring that behavior, then there wouldn't be a need to review those plays as much because hopefully, if they don't stop completely, they would at least decrease. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, they're never gonna stop completely. There's a lot of times where guys are going hard to the net and they just kind of don't want to get out of the way and they bowl over the goalie. That's then they just got to face it. Five in a game, you're out of the game if the ref deems it to be intentional or that you could have got out of the way. I think if this is the case, it's gonna significantly reduce the amount of goaltender collisions, or hopefully it will. That we'll see. But you'll never completely get it out of the game. But hopefully it'll create a safer environment for the goaltenders this year in the season.
And the other some of the other penalties that have been upgraded. Just to clarify, they're being added as there's still going to be 2-minute minors, but also game misconducts. Is that what it is? I just want to make sure I get this down correct.
They've just updated the game misconduct category. So before you would only have boarding and checking behind, maybe a hit to the head. Those kind of penalties were considered for game misconducts. They've added a whole, like mass of penalties, depending on the severity of the infraction to this list that could be considered for a game misconduct. So clipping and charging and elbowing interference, you'd see those at max get a major 5 minutes, but these have added to the possibility to give game misconducts. So if there's a clipping call that gets charged and it's a bad one, or a charging one, or an elbowing, to the head, or an interference call that's way late after the whistle, and he's injured, or kneeing, headbutting, any of those ones, butt ending or spearing, any of those things can be added to unnecessary things, heat of the moment reactions that some players do, and these will be added to game misconducts to hopefully deter players from actually doing them.
And on top of that, I would think too, Eddie, that this is a safety issue too, because it seems like a lot of these rules are geared towards either more scoring or more safety.
Yeah, it's definitely a safety issue. Yeah, like we saw with the restricted area, the goalkeeping one. These are definitely geared towards keeping players safe and preventing. Obviously there's been a huge thing with preventing concussions and hit to the heads, and hopefully this kind of limits the amount of dangerous plays we see in a game.
The another rule that they're talking about going back and forth on safety and offense here is on the face-offs. Eddie, it looks like they're not going to allow players to get kicked out of the face-off circle as easily on an icing call, and it looks like they're going to start calling more of those delay a game power play type things, Eddie.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna read the rule up just so a lot of people understand this one because it's a little bit confusing on how they're doing it. How the NHL has worded it is to curb delay tactics on faceoffs after icing infractions in situations where the defending team is guilty of a faceoff violation following an icing. The defending player who is initially lined up for the faceoff will be given a warning, but will be required to remain in the circle to take the faceoff. So a lot of people obviously when you see like two guys get kicked out or the ref doesn't drop the puck, kicks the guy out. For me, that's I it's insanely frustrating. I hate when the ref won't drop the puck or he'll kick a guy out of the face-off, and I get why if the guy's trying to take the face-off unfair, I get why they're kicking him out, but it just delays the game and it's really annoying and frustrating to watch as a fan. So I hope this will limit that for sure because it's it's frustrating to watch. Two guys line up for an important face-off, and you just got to sit there and watch the ref like throw each guy out of the face-off, and then you've got to bring in your right winger to take the face-off. And if it's an important face-off, there's chances are if your center gets thrown out, you're gonna lose that face-off. And a lot of times, that has to affect how the coach is going to line up his players. A lot of times you see coaches put in, two centers in there. So if one of their centers gets thrown out, if you got another center in there, and that kind of messes up the way they're going to set up their lines for the rest of the period. So I hope this prevents that, and at least they'll be able to stay in the face off after a warning. And I hope this limits this for sure.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think you might not see as much of the two centers on the ice, shorthanded or on the power play, depending on maybe on the power play you'll still see it, just because certain teams like to have two out there, just alternate or whatnot. But I think might not see it as much, Eddie.
Yeah, and I hope so. And I hope it also cuts down on there's a lot of it's hard to because you want them to cut down on players trying to cheat on the face-off, but you also don't want to see the ref throw every guy out of the face-off. So I hope there's kind of a median in there that they've met with this rule, and it kind of limits both from happening.
Another rule that the NHL changed around a few things with the overtime, Eddie. They, as you remember before, after the overtime, the Zamboni doesn't come out and do anything with the ice. The Zamboni would only come out on the shootout, pardon me, and do the middle section of the ice. So now they're going to have the Zamboni come out there with a fresh sheet of ice before the overtime. And in addition to that, instead of going from the same side of your bench, they're going to have the team switch like they do in the second period with the long change on the line changes, Eddie.
Yeah, and this is what we alluded to before with this trying to increase scoring, and it's been publicly out there that the NHL wants to eliminate the shootout, or at least limit the amount of shootouts they go to, and they're hoping this is going to do it. This is kind of a passive way to do it. They wanted to extend overtime, or do different ways how they're going to do overtime so they can avoid the shootout. And I think this is the first step in them doing that, and hopefully this works for them. They're going to obviously switch sides, and then they're going to have a dry, a clean ice, cleanish ice for them to skate on. So I think this is just for them to try and eliminate the amount of shootouts that they go to, and end the game in overtime, so they don't have to go to the shootout.
Now, what about the other ideas? Some of the things that people talked about, some of the ideas I liked is there was adding more time. There was also decrease the number of skaters, and then I've heard combo idea. One that a couple fans I've heard mention is, hey, let's just do 10 minutes, not 20, because sometimes 20 comes up and everybody's like, you know what, that's too long to do a whole nother period. But some people have come up with this idea. I kind of like this one. See what you think, Eddie. Some people say, let's do 5 minutes of 4-on-4 and then 5 minutes of 3-on-3. What would you think about that kind of an idea?
The only reason I don't like them having longer overtime, there's a lot of times where you'll have, games in the season we've got to play back-to-back games, or, you've got to, the longer you play, the more chance you have guys getting injury. And the longer you get in a game, more guys are tired, people, I don't like the idea of having 10-minute overtimes. I think the reason I like the shootout is not for I like the fan aspect of it, where you get to watch these guys come down. I don't see, it's not the fairest way to end a game, but when you keep extending overtime, there's more chance of guys getting injured. And I think if you go and you're in the second 3-on-3 overtime and Sidney Crosby gets injured for the rest of the season, I think fans are going to be more disappointed in that than having to go to a shootout. So I think this is a good way to do it, and I think it will probably increase the amount of games that finish in overtime instead of a shootout. But I honestly have no problem with the shootout. If people really have a problem with the shootout, there's no real option. If they extend overtime, there's more chances for guys to get hurt, and I don't think anybody really wants to go back to ties. So.
Yeah, that was another point I was going to bring up, was the ties, because I agree with you. I like the shootout too. Every time I go to a game, it's very exciting to watch. Everybody in the arena is pretty much on their feet, and it's either a collective cheer, or it's a collective sigh, or it's a collective boo, or whatever it is, depending on which player is going, trying to score or not score for the home team or the away team. So it's very, very exciting. And some other fans have told me, they go, you know what, let's just get rid of it. Let's just do the 5 minutes and just go back to ties. But I think there's a feeling of just unsatisfaction, maybe, Eddie, because I think when one team gets 1 point and the other team gets 1 point, it's just kind of like, yeah, okay, we kind of played, but we played really for what? A point. I think when you add in that 2 points, I think it makes the game more exciting, and I think it's just more worthwhile. I think if you just ended in a tie with 1-1 on the point total for the season, I don't know. It's like, it just seems kind of meaningless to me. What do you think, Eddie?
Yeah, I think in any American or North American sports, I don't think you can really have ties. I just don't think it works for the fan base where everybody wants a winner, and I don't really see ties working. Ties work in soccer, and that's the only place I really see ties work. I don't see, there's the odd tie in football. They've tried to eliminate it, and I don't see them bringing ties back as a good solution, just so they can remove the shootout. Obviously everybody wants a winner, and I think more people would be happy, even if they lost in overtime instead of tying. At least if you lose in overtime, you get a point anyway. and tying is just kind of unsatisfactory. And like you said, a lot of people are just gonna feel like they didn't really get everything out of that if they see a tie.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, Eddie. Moving on, another rule aimed at the offense is in regards to the puck going out of bounds. It looks like the NHL, Eddie, wants to have more of those pucks that get deflected out of bounds or get shot off the glass and whatnot, to have those faceoffs in the offensive zone. Where last year, it kind of went back and forth. It depended more on who it touched last or who shot it out and whatnot. What do you think about them trying to make more of the faceoffs in the offensive zone?
This is probably just a scoring one too. I I don't really notice when it happens that much with the voice related to the puck going out of bounds. I think one thing they should focus on is completely taking that shooting the puck over the glass rule out, like unless it's intentional. I get if a guy like you can see it, you can really you can tell ref players they can tell when a guy intentionally shoots it out. Um, and if you're in your own end killing a penalty or there's a lot of pressure and you dump it out, I get that should be a delay game penalty. But there's a lot of times you see guys just trying to dump it up the ice and it goes over, and that's a penalty and that can change the game. I think I hate that rule honestly unless it's intentional, and I think that's one thing they should focus on. And I hope this kind of leads to them taking that out of the game.
Yeah, I agree with you totally. I mean, if it's intentional, that's one thing, and the other times it just seems to be a little bit too much, in giving out too many power plays almost in that kind of instance when it's shot out for different other reasons. Because, like you said, you can tell when a player shoots it out on purpose or not. But I do like more faceoffs in the offensive zone. I think it's going to help out. Maybe not a lot, but it's going to help out a little bit. Are there any other rules out there that you think the NHL should have changed, or anything you dislike that they did?
Well,
Any suggestions?
one rule I like is the taking the spinorama move out of the shootout. I think it wasn't fair to the goalies. A lot of times the player completely runs into the goalie on the spinorama, and you can see most of the time a player does the spinorama, the goalie's not too happy. Yeah, they get snowed in the face or he gets run into or both, and I think taking the spinorama out is fair. Or at least the way players were doing the spinorama is they were getting within like a foot of the goalie, completely stopping, snowing him in the face, and spinning around and throwing it into the open net. There was not much the goalie can do, and I think taking that out was a good rule for the shootout.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think Patrick Kane's going to be too happy about that. But for those of you that obviously don't know, that was one of his patented moves. But also, as you mentioned, when you're in that shootout or penalty shot, to stop the momentum of the puck and then to turn around and shoot it. I mean, you're not supposed to do that. So when they were allowing these spinorama moves, kind of it was almost a judgment call, Eddie, because they'd have to watch the puck and see, okay, the player is stopping and spinning. Is the puck still going forward? Is the puck stopped? Is the player's momentum stopped? And I think there was just too much gray area in deciding, and it seemed like the refs were just kind of allowing it to go more, and I think it was a huge disadvantage to the goalies, like you had mentioned.
Yeah, and I just think I'm not 100% sure with I think you always have to have forward momentum. I'm not sure if you're allowed to stop. I'm not really well versed on that rule. I don't think you're allowed to stop. I think you're supposed to have forward motion. And even if you're allowed to stop, like these guys are full force stop in front of the goalie, snowing him and pulling the puck around back towards away from the play and spinning and putting in the net. So I know it pissed a lot of people off and when it happened and I think it was a good call for them to take it out. One of the better calls, even though it's such a small rule, it's kind of a step forward. If they're not going to take the shootout out, it's a good way to go in eliminating some things that make the shootout bad.
I agree. Is there any other rules out there that you would like to see them do or change or anything like that, or you're pretty happy with everything that the NHL put out this week?
Yeah, I think they've done what they can, and they've done good in what they've done. But I think as I mentioned before, and kicking the puck in the net should be allowed. I don't see any problem with it really. Like I don't see how that is unfair in any way. Like I said, if you glove the puck in and you slide it in with your hand or you throw it in, that's a different story. And I think also dumping the puck out unless it's intentional, and eliminating that rule is one thing they should also work on as well. But other than that, I think the addition of these rules, they won't make a huge difference. But they'll go away into making the game safer and increasing the offense a bit, which I don't think we really need to do. But I don't think we'll see a huge change in it either, though.
Yeah, I don't think we'll see a huge change either. My only concern for me is more the goalie interference type plays. For me, I think those should be reviewed more often. And I don't, I know some people look at those situations and then they complain because they're like, well, it's going to take more time. But, in the NFL, for example, every scoring play is reviewed and they get that stuff done quick. So there's no reason why, if the NHL doesn't want to review every scoring play, then that's fine. I mean, but just adding and looking at those type of plays, I don't think it's going to delay the game that much. So that's my only thing. I wish that they would just automatically review it regardless, if the ref thinks there was or wasn't contact, just to make sure they get it right. And I don't think that would delay the game, Eddie, at
You
all.
mean on goals, like goal interference for goals, right? Not like okay.
Exactly.
I was just making
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, I think that would be a good thing. You see it happen a lot where obviously the goalie's gonna get a lot of times he's gonna complain that he gets hit every time, even if he does it.
Right.
So yeah, I think not too much time putting into it. Obviously, you don't want it, they don't want to slow the game down, but I think um putting some more thought into review on that could be a good thing for them and going a long way and having good goals called and any goals that shouldn't be they should be disallowed. So yeah, I think that could be something they could work on as well.
All right, that's going to do it for this week. The contest is still going. The last word for our contest to get 2 tickets to the opening night of the Ducks this season will be the Anaheim. That is the last word, Anaheim. If you go back and you listen to the previous 4 podcasts, there's a word that we give out in each one. There's 5 words total, and they make a phrase. I'm going to put out a little article on it just to remind everybody too in social media. But when you figure out what that 5 word phrase is, go ahead and email us at ducksandpucks@mail.com. And what we will do is pick a random winner, and we'll announce that winner, and we'll keep it open, the entries, at least for the next 3-4 days, obviously, because people need to listen to all the podcasts, make sure everyone gets a fair shake. And good luck to everybody, and we'll see you next week.
The Anaheim Ducks are the Stanley Cup champions.